She showed up at a billionaire's wedding in a simple dress. The guests laughed. The guards pushed her out of the gate. No one knew who she really was. Subscribe and subscribe in the comments where you're watching from. The sun hung high above the Swiss Alps, casting warm light over the majestic Chateau d'Ully, a 16th-century castle nestled on a private estate overlooking a glassy lake. From the air, the sprawling lawns and sculpted hedgerows resembled a painting, timeless, elegant, and obscenely expensive. That morning, an entourage of decorators, florists, caterers, and staff had descended like a well-rehearsed ballet troupe, transforming the ancient grounds into a scene of immaculate grandeur. Snow-white tents stood like silk pavilions across the lawn. Petals of imported white roses arranged in intricate spirals lined every pathway. Ornate fountains overflowed with champagne. The air shimmered with music from a quartet rehearsing Vivaldi in the courtyard. The wedding of Graham Winters, the elusive American tech billionaire, was not just a private ceremony. It was an event of global interest, cloaked in the kind of exclusivity that could only be bought with billions. The guest list had been sealed months in advance, and its contents whispered about in elite circles. European royalty, crypto tycoons, fashion moguls, and the children of old money dynasties. No journalists had been allowed within 10 miles of the gates, and private security, dressed in tuxedos and equipped with earpieces, moved like shadows among the hedges. As Rolls-Royces and Bentleys rolled onto the crushed gravel entrance, one after another, a woman stepped out of an unmarked, modest electric sedan parked discreetly at the edge of the driveway. She emerged alone, unaccompanied, unguarded, and without fanfare. Her skin glowed a deep, warm brown in the sunlight. She wore a sleeveless linen dress of pale cream, its hem brushing her calves. It was the kind of dress meant for comfort and breathability, not pageantry. Her leather sandals were simple, practical, and lightly scuffed from use. A messenger-style clutch hung from her shoulder. Her hair, thick, coiled, natural, was pulled back into a neat bun at the nape of her neck. There was no jewelry adorning her ears, no glittering clutch, no designer logo to announce her status. Only her posture, straight and steady, and her expression, calm but assured, spoke of anything deeper than surface. She held a wedding invitation in her hand. Its cream envelope was heavy with gilt edges and bore the seal of the Winters estate. She walked toward the main archway, where a path of red carpet unfurled beneath a floral canopy held up by 4 marble columns. At the threshold stood a man in a dark, immaculately tailored suit. Broad-shouldered and stiff as a statue, he scanned each guest with the weary focus of someone who had memorized names, faces, and social ties. His earpiece crackled faintly with chatter. When the woman stepped toward him, his eyes flicked from her face to her dress, and something behind them tightened. "Staff entrance is around back," he said automatically, his Swiss accent clipped and professional. The woman paused. "I'm not staff," she said softly. Her voice was unassuming, but clear, controlled, unwavering. She extended the invitation toward him. The guard, Marco, accepted it without enthusiasm. He turned it over, then looked at the seal, then back at her. "Wait here," he said, stepping aside to speak into his mic. She nodded and stood silently. Around her, guests in $1,000 gowns and Italian suits arrived by the minute, escorted by assistants and stylists, their laughter airy and detached. 3 women in couture swept up the stairs behind her, one in an emerald silk gown, another in a column of gold sequins, and the third in diaphanous lavender. All 3 paused at the sight of her. "She lost?" one murmured, lips barely moving. The others giggled. The woman in gold was Cassandra Valmont, heiress to a French oil dynasty and a staple on European society pages. She leaned toward the others and said with a mock whisper, "I think she came to apply for housekeeping." The woman in lavender lifted her phone, tilting it discreetly, and took a photo. "For the archives," she said. The woman in cream met their eyes one by one, unblinking. The laughter faltered, then rose again, less amused, more hostile. "You're brave, showing up like that," Cassandra said, her voice louder now. "But I'm afraid the charity ball was last month." Before the woman could respond, another voice joined the fray. A young blonde influencer named Delaney Rivers, fresh from a spread in Vogue Italia. "Is she crashing?" Delaney asked, feigning innocence. "That's so retro. I love it." Guests nearby turned to watch. Phones came out. The woman in cream stood still and silent, her fingers tightening just slightly around the envelope. She did not move, did not speak. She simply endured. Marco returned, accompanied by a woman in a navy pantsuit with a clipboard. Her expression was not cruel, just indifferent in that bureaucratic way that dismissed human nuance. "Ma'am," she said, "your name's not on the list. This invitation must be a forgery." "It's real," the woman said calmly. "Check again." "We don't have time for games," the woman with the clipboard snapped. "Step aside, or we will remove you." A smattering of applause erupted from one corner. Someone shouted, "Good call." Another voice chimed in, "She probably printed that invite at home." The crowd was fully engaged now. What had begun as a curiosity had become entertainment. And so, under the blinding sun, amid laughter and sneering and the whir of phone cameras, the woman was seized by the arms. Marco on one side, a younger guard on the other, and led down the grand staircase. Her linen dress billowed slightly in the breeze. Her sandals skidded briefly on the marble. The wedding arch loomed behind her, grotesquely beautiful. The jeers followed. "Bye, sweetie." "Wrong zip code." "Maybe try catering next time." The guests laughed. The cameras kept rolling, and the woman kept walking, her chin high, her face unreadable, her silence the only defiance she had left. At the base of the stairs, the guards released her and turned back without another word. She looked once over her shoulder at the castle, then turned away. She walked alone across the gravel, past the hedges and rose gardens, past the murmuring fountains and velvet ropes. The laughter faded behind her, replaced by the distant trill of violins warming up for the ceremony. No one knew her name. No one cared. Not yet. But she was not just a guest. She was the bride. The gravel crunched softly beneath her sandals as she made her way toward the edge of the estate, the path sloping gently towards the lake that shimmered like polished silver under the afternoon sun. The laughter still echoed faintly behind her, a cruel reminder of how quickly people turned joy into sport, how easy it was to erase someone with a glance, a smirk, a snap of a camera. Her dress, once crisply pressed, now bore smudges of dust where the guards' hands had gripped her arms. A tear along the hem fluttered with each step she took, as if marking the distance from dignity to disgrace. But she did not allow herself to cry. Alaya had long since taught herself how to wear stillness like armor. She had needed it during those years when she was the only black girl in advanced seminars, when her professors looked past her hand to call on someone else, when strangers mistook her for an assistant or a temp despite the faculty badge on her coat. She had needed it when her colleagues whispered behind her back after Graham proposed, assumptions wrapped in civility, doubts laced with compliments. She had learned to expect the side glances, the quiet, "Oh, you're his wife?" with just enough surprise to make her stomach twist. But this was different. This was public, vicious, and gleeful. At the edge of the estate, just beyond the last security post, a marble bench sat beneath an old cypress tree. She lowered herself onto it carefully, her fingers brushing the worn stone. From here, she could see the castle's spires rising like thorns above the gardens. Inside those walls, the ceremony was being prepared. Champagne chilled, napkins folded, violins tuned. Guests clinked glasses and took selfies against the antique backdrops, already forgetting her. Her fingers found the shredded remains of the invitation still clutched in her hand. The paper was thick, hand-pressed, the kind used for royal stationery. It had been real, but in their eyes, nothing about her could be. Her breath came shallowly. The weight of what had just happened sat in her chest like a stone. She remembered walking into the print shop with Graham weeks ago to design those invitations. He'd insisted on doing it personally. No assistants, no branding team, just the two of them, huddled over typefaces and color palettes. He'd wanted everything to reflect their story. Minimal, elegant, honest, he'd said. She'd chosen the ivory paper herself, and now it lay in ribbons at her feet. She closed her eyes. She could still hear them, their voices like shards of glass in her ears. The woman in gold, the one who laughed like cruelty was currency. The influencer with her phone out, chasing clout with each swipe. The words they had used. Staff, beggar, crasher, gold digger. They hadn't said the other word, but it hung there, unspoken and obvious. In their world, people like her didn't belong, unless they were pouring drinks or cleaning up after the party. She wanted to scream. Instead, she breathed. In, out. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, steady and calm from years past. Don't let them see you fall, baby. Let the ones who laugh get tired first. That lesson had carried her through school, through faculty meetings, through every panel where she had to prove herself 3 times over. It carried her now. Somewhere inside the castle, Graham was waiting. He didn't know. He couldn't know. His last message to her had been a sweet voice note that morning, saying he'd meet her at the altar. He hadn't seen the live streams. He hadn't watched them rip her to pieces. Back inside the Chateau du Lit, the wedding engine churned. Staff moved briskly, fluffing floral arrangements and ensuring that no less than 7 varieties of champagne were evenly distributed across reception zones. Makeup artists hovered around guests with emergency kits, and security maintained their strict perimeters, oblivious to the storm they'd already unleashed. At the center of it all stood Graham Winters, adjusting the cuffs of his cream linen jacket. He looked calm, composed, and slightly distracted, the way most grooms looked before a wedding. But something gnawed at the back of his mind. Alaya should have arrived by now. She wasn't answering her phone. He assumed she was delayed in makeup or with her stylist. She'd insisted on dressing alone, wanting privacy before the ceremony. But the clock was ticking. The seating was done. The quartet was ready. "Sir," his assistant Nora approached with an apologetic glance. "We have an issue." His heart lurched. What kind of issue? There was a situation at the entrance. A guest tried to enter without proper identification. It caused a minor disruption, but security handled it. He frowned. Handled it how? Well, Nora hesitated. They escorted her out. He stared at her. Who? I think you should see this. Nora tapped her tablet and turned it toward him. A video began to play. Shaky footage, laughter in the background. A woman in a cream linen dress surrounded by sneering guests. The camera zoomed in. Her face turned slightly toward the lens. Graham felt his knees weaken. "Pause that," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Nora froze the frame. It was Alaya. His bride, the woman he loved, the woman he had built everything with. She stood there, small and surrounded, her posture rigid, her eyes fixed forward. In the background, someone shouted, "She's ruining the aesthetic." Another voice laughed, "Probably here to seduce a rich one." Graham handed the tablet back in silence. Then he turned on his heel. Inside the main hall, murmurs were starting to spread. Influencers had begun uploading stories with captions like "Drama at the Winter's Wedding" and "Wedding Crasher Gone Viral." A short clip from the incident was already trending on multiple platforms, boosted by bots and gossip algorithms. Comments rolled in by the second, mocking, vile, curious. Back beneath the cypress tree, Aliyah finally allowed her shoulders to sag. She could feel the weight of every stare, every word, every assumption. But even now, she refused to cry. She would not let them own her tears. She looked out at the lake. The water was still. In its reflection, she saw a woman bruised but not broken, scorned but unbowed. She was tired, so tired but not undone. Then she heard footsteps. She turned, expecting another guest, another insult, but instead she saw him. Graham, breathless, eyes wide with disbelief and rage. His jacket was open, his hair slightly tousled, as if he'd run all the way from the ballroom. When he saw her, his face crumbled. "Aliyah," he whispered, voice raw. He rushed to her, knelt in front of the bench, and took her hands in his. "What happened?" he asked, already knowing. Her lip trembled just once, then she steadied. "They saw me," she said simply, and decided that was enough. Graham looked down at her hands, saw the torn invitation, the faint red marks where she'd been gripped. Something inside him split. "I'll fix this," he said. She gave a tired smile. "That's not the point." "It is now." He stood. His spine straightened. His eyes hardened into something that looked like steel. Behind them, the castle loomed, its windows glowing with wealth and laughter. The crowd inside still believed they were attending a fairy tale. They didn't know the story had already turned. Graham reached for his phone. "Call security," he told Nora. "We're about to clean house." And just like that, the wind shifted. The sun dipped lower, and the wedding of the year braced for a reckoning it had never seen coming. Graham moved like a man possessed. Each step across the stone corridor of Chateau du Lit echoed with purpose, his polished shoes clicking sharply against the marble as he passed stunned attendants and bewildered guests. The gentle murmur of music from the string quartet faded behind him as he entered the heart of the reception hall, where 1,000 candles flickered against crystal and gold. Opulence bloomed in every corner of the room, white orchids cascading from candelabras, imported Italian linens draped across tables, waiters in pressed uniforms carrying champagne like liquid light. And yet, none of it registered. Not the grandeur, not the spectacle. Only the image of Aliyah's face did, etched into his mind. Brave, humiliated, and wronged. His assistant, Nora, followed closely, whispering into her earpiece, relaying instructions. Security teams were already mobilizing, reviewing footage, identifying the guests involved in what was quickly evolving from a petty cruelty into a media scandal. The castle's internal network hummed to life, syncing with facial recognition logs and invitation scanners. The machine of the wedding, designed for luxury and pageantry, was now being repurposed into an engine of justice. The crowd quieted when Graham entered the courtyard where the guests had gathered for pre-ceremony cocktails. At first, it was subtle. A shift in the air, a ripple of uncertainty. Some guests turned and smiled at him, raising glasses in mock toasts. Others moved toward him, eager to shake hands, snap selfies, offer hollow congratulations. But One look at his face stopped them in their tracks. Cassandra Valmont, still in her gold gown that shimmered like molten arrogance, raised her flute lazily. "Finally," she drawled. "We thought the groom got cold feet." Graham didn't answer. His gaze swept across the courtyard, stopping briefly on Delaney Rivers, the influencer in lavender, who quickly tucked her phone behind her back. Then he looked up to the balcony, where Alaya now stood silently. She had followed at a distance, not out of shame, but because she knew this was no longer about her proving anything. The truth didn't need to scream. It only needed to stand and be seen. Graham stepped onto the dais. The music faded completely now. He raised a hand, not in greeting, but in command. "Stop." The word sliced through the ambient chatter like a blade. The servers paused mid-step. The guests froze, glasses halfway to lips. The silence became suffocating. "This celebration," he began, his voice calm but thunderous in its restraint, "was never about show. It wasn't about brand deals or trending tags or networking opportunities. This was meant to be a moment of honesty, a ceremony of love. But some of you made it into a spectacle of cruelty." He let the silence stretch, watched their eyes flicker with discomfort. Still, no one moved. "You all saw her," he continued. "You judged her dress, her hair, her skin. You assumed. You laughed. You filmed. You shared. You didn't ask her name. You didn't look at the invitation she carried. You didn't care that she walked through these gates with more right to be here than any of you." A gasp rose from the crowd, faint but unmistakable. "Alaya," he said, and turned toward the balcony, extending his hand. She stepped forward, the sunlight catching on her bare shoulders. Her expression was unreadable but proud. She descended the steps slowly, her sandals still dusty from the gravel path, the remnants of her humiliation still clinging to her hem. Yet she walked like a queen. And when she reached him, he took her hand without hesitation, lifting it high for all to see. "This is my wife," he said. "We were married in a civil ceremony 6 months ago. No press, no cameras, no designer gowns, just two people making a promise." Murmurs rippled like wind through the crowd, stunned and off-kilter. "She's the reason this day exists. She stood by me when I had nothing. When neural core was an idea scribbled on a napkin. When I slept on the floor of my studio, living off instant noodles. When investors wouldn't take my calls and banks wouldn't return my emails. She believed, and now you've turned her into your amusement." Alaya stood beside him, saying nothing, her fingers still entwined with his. Graham's expression hardened. "So now, let's talk about consequences." He turned toward the staff, stationed discreetly along the courtyard edges. "Leia," he called. A woman in a navy suit stepped forward. Leia Chen, his chief of staff and longtime confidant, held a tablet in her hands. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes gleamed with precision. She tapped quickly, pulling up video files, social media posts, timestamps. "Names," Graham said. Cassandra Valmont's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" "You first," Leia replied. "Footage, audio, hashtags, that mocking toast. Your comment about charity events. You laughed. You filmed." A guard stepped forward and addressed Cassandra directly. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us." She scoffed. "This is absurd." The guard didn't flinch. "You're being removed." As Cassandra opened her mouth to protest, her heel caught on the edge of the carpet. She stumbled, then righted herself with a snarl. The crowd watched in stunned silence as she was escorted toward the exit, her gold train dragging behind her like the final note of a song gone sour. Next was Delaney Rivers. Laya held up her tablet, live-streamed the incident, captioned it crashing the fairy tale, sent it to over 200,000 followers, monetized the clip within 10 minutes. Delaney's phone was confiscated before she could say a word. Her publicist, watching helplessly, said nothing as two guards flanked the influencer and led her toward the gate. Guests turned away, some whispering, others glaring. Her career, so meticulously curated, was unraveling in real time. One by one, the names were read aloud. A socialite from Manhattan, a fintech bro from Silicon Valley, a venture capitalist who'd muttered a racial slur under his breath caught by a waiter's recording. All of them were marched out, their exits filmed by paparazzi from outside the estate's barrier walls. Every flash of a camera was a nail in the coffin of their reputations. Alaya stood motionless through it all. She hadn't asked for revenge. She hadn't demanded this reckoning, but it was unfolding because the truth, once revealed, demanded resolution, not through violence or scandal, but through clarity. Graham turned back to the remaining guests. This day, he said, was supposed to be about love. Instead, you turned it into a test and failed. If you are here only for status, for appearances, for the prestige of proximity, I invite you to leave. No one moved at first. Then, quietly, a man in a bespoke gray suit set down his glass and walked away. Then, a woman in a designer dress. One by one, they departed, not because they had been asked directly, but because they could no longer pretend. What remained was silence. Not the uneasy kind, but something deeper. Recognition. A stillness born of reckoning. Graham looked at Alaya. "You didn't have to walk through that alone," he said, his voice low. She met his gaze. "I did, because I needed to know." His jaw clenched. And now they know. In the distance, the lake shimmered like it had before, but something in the air had changed. The wedding was still to come, the ceremony not yet complete, but the farce had been stripped away, leaving only truth. And that truth, in a dusty linen dress with a torn hem and bare shoulders kissed by the sun, stood taller than any crown could afford. The air had changed, not just in the courtyard of Chateau du Lit, where the wind now whispered between the arches as if trying to carry away the scent of shame, but in the hearts of those who remained. The laughter had quieted. The spectacle had soured, and where once the wedding of the century had promised elegance and status, it now bore witness to something raw, unfiltered, and profoundly human. As the sun slipped lower behind the distant Alps, casting long gold shadows across the manicured lawn, the opulence around them dimmed, like a stage set retreating into the background of a story no longer about wealth but truth. Graham turned to Alaya, his expression softer now, the fire of anger having burned itself into something calmer, no less fierce, but more focused. He still held her hand. In all the time they had been together, through years of building something from nothing, of resisting doubt and expectation, he had never let go of her like others let go of ideas that no longer served their interests. She was not an idea. She was the reason he was still standing. "You didn't have to do this," he said, voice hushed, meant only for her. Alaya looked at him. The sunset bathed her features in a honeyed glow. The dust on her dress, the olive stain on her cheek, the exhaustion in her shoulders, all remained. And yet none of it diminished her. If anything, it magnified what others had missed. "I did," she said, "for us." And then she stepped away, not to disappear but to transform. She passed the guests in silence, the ones who had stayed, the ones who had said nothing cruel, but also nothing kind. They watched her go, uncertain whether to applaud or avert their eyes. No one stopped her this time. No one dared. Inside the chateau, she moved quickly through the quiet corridors until she reached a private suite on the second floor. The same room where earlier that day her dress had been carefully steamed, her bouquet placed in a crystal vase, her name written on a handwritten note left by one of the staff, to the most radiant bride. The note now lay half buried beneath the folds of her first gown. The second dress awaited on a mannequin by the window, untouched, perfect. She approached it with a stillness that betrayed no emotion, only purpose. Piece by piece she removed the remnants of what she had worn, stripping away the pain not to forget it, but to shed what no longer served her. The gown slid over her skin like water, cool and smooth, made of ivory silk that shimmered with every breath she took. The bodice was embroidered with hundreds of tiny freshwater pearls, their soft luster gleaming in the dying light. She unpinned her bun, allowing her natural curls to fall around her shoulders in waves. She ran her fingers through them once, no styling, no artifice. Then, from the velvet-lined box on the table, she took the diamond hair clip Graham had given her 2 months ago, not an engagement ring, not a gift of apology, just a quiet gesture. He had said, "You don't need sparkle to be seen, but I like the way this one catches the light, just like you do." She placed it above her temple. Then she stepped out. On the terrace, the air held its breath. Guests turned as one towards the staircase, and there she was. Elia descended slowly, her figure framed by the golden wash of the setting sun. Her gown moved with her like a ripple in a tide. Her bare shoulders gleamed. Her eyes were steady, unreadable, proud. No longer the woman in the simple linen dress, but no less herself. She was not transformed by the gown was transformed by her. A hush fell over the gathering, thick with reverence. Some guests averted their gaze out of shame. Others watched, transfixed. There was no applause, no murmurs, just silence, deep and acknowledging, the kind that follows revelation. Graham met her at the bottom of the stairs. His eyes glistened, not from tears but from awe, from the weight of everything that had happened, and the knowledge that even now, even after everything, she was here, still walking toward him. He offered his hand again. She took it. The officiant, a gentle Italian man named Father Lorenzo, stepped forward. His white robes billowed slightly in the breeze, his face serene, though even he seemed to carry the knowledge that what was about to take place would be unlike any wedding he'd ever overseen. Not for the guests, not for the setting, but for the meaning, now laid bare. "Dearly beloved," he began, his accent soft and warm, "we are gathered not only to witness the union of two souls, but to bear witness to something greater. Today we honor the strength of love, tested by fire and found unshaken." The ceremony unfolded slowly, without pretense, without theatrics. Graham and Elia stood hand in hand as the wind tugged gently at her veil, which she had chosen not to wear until this very moment. Now it fluttered like a banner behind her, not hiding her face but framing it. Father Lorenzo asked the questions, and they answered, not just with words, but with the weight of all they had endured. When it was time for vows, Elia spoke first. Her voice did not tremble. "I promise," she said, "to stand beside you in truth, to speak when it matters, to listen when it's hardest, to be your anchor in chaos and your witness in joy. I will not vanish when the world is unkind, nor falter when others misunderstand us. I will hold your name in my hands like something precious, because it is." Graham's reply was quieter, but no less certain. "I vow to be your home," he said, "wherever we are, however we're seen. I promise to carry your truth even when the world refuses to. You're not my possession, not my proof. You're the reason I'm not afraid to be seen for who I am." When the kiss came, it was not loud or dramatic. It was gentle, steady, the seal of a bond already forged, already tested, already unbroken. Then they turned to face the crowd. This time the applause was different, no longer hesitant, no longer a reflex. It grew slowly, sincerely, rising like a tide of respect. Some guests dabbed at their eyes, unashamed. Others simply nodded, as if acknowledging something within themselves that had shifted. Later, beneath a canopy of stars and lanterns that floated above the garden like tiny galaxies, the reception unfolded with far less extravagance and far more soul. The music was softer now, the conversations more real, the laughter quieter but genuine. The shadows of what had happened earlier still lingered, but they no longer controlled the evening. The light had returned. Graham and Elia danced together beneath the old olive trees, his hands on her waist, her head on his chest. Around them, the world spun more slowly, as if trying to take them in, to capture something unrepeatable. Elia approached during one of the lulls. Her tablet was tucked under her arm now, her expression relaxed for the first time that day. "It's done," she said simply. Elia looked up. "The internet's flipped," Elia continued. "You're trending as the billionaire's truth. Hashtags everywhere. They're calling it iconic." Graham chuckled, the sound low and private. He looked at Elia. "They're just catching up." She smiled. "Let them." She leaned into him, allowing the rhythm of the music to carry her for a while. Around them, the garden glowed with laughter, with soft conversation, with possibility. There would be commentary. There would be analysis. There would be think pieces and podcasts and Instagram reels, but that was tomorrow's world. Tonight belonged to them. And as the lights twinkled above and the stars watched in silence, Elia stood taller than she ever had. Not because the crowd had turned in her favor, not because justice had finally found a stage, but because she had never needed their approval to shine. She had walked into judgment and walked out stronger, not because she had triumphed, but because she had never left herself behind. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more. Watch the next video to discover another powerful tale, and share this one with someone who needs to hear it.